Okay, and then we're live. Good day and welcome to another episode of the Air Force podcast. I'm Yaku, and today we have Kathleen Booyse with us. She has her own yoga practice studio as well as her own podcast. Welcome, Kathleen. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you. Yako. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I just love the work that you're doing. And I think, we spoke a bit before the show, and you were saying, the reason you do these things is because it's really interesting and you get to learn. And I think, that's what really inspires me to do things like this is because teaching people about yoga really is my passion. So thank you for the platform to be able to share.
No, thanks a lot. Thank you for being here. Kathleen, what inspired you to start practicing yoga and then also starting your own practice?
Oh, I always love to like you said, I've got my own podcast, and then I always ask people these questions. They're always like, "That's such a loaded question." It's such a big question, but I think for me, it really was a mental health journey for me. I was diagnosed with bipolar about 9 years ago now, so my early 20s, and at that point, I was in production, so I was working 18-hour shifts. It's like you get up at 4 a.m., you're drinking a Red Bull, you're smoking a cigarette, you're on set, you're like eating a really shitty food, you're going through burnout basically, and you're just pushing through. And it basically led to a full on breakdown, at which point I was diagnosed with bipolar. And at that point, started going to yoga. It just started like once a week and then built up to twice a week. I'd go to a studio in Cape Town. I'd put my mat right at the back in the corner. And I was like, which I think most people are when they start this yoga journey. Your mat's right in the corner. You're like, don't look at me. Don't speak to me. I don't want the teacher to even know I'm in the room. Like, don't know what I'm doing. But I just wanted that little time, like that hour of being there. And it was really a time where I could just forget about everything else, and I think really just connect to myself. And so I was wanting to get out of production for quite some time, just knowing that it's not, and I think anyone in the industry will tell you, like, it's not a sustainable place to be. Like, the hours are just crazy, and what's expected of you is insane. And one day my mom said to me, but what do you want to do? Like, if you're not going to be in production, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I don't know, which again, I think is so many of my friends I know are like, they want to do something else than what they're doing, but they just don't know what it is. And my mom said to me, well, what makes you happy? What, what, what do you do when you feel the most like grounded and happy and at peace? And I was like, well, to be honest, when I get on my yoga mat is pretty much the only time that I feel pretty relaxed and clear and grounded. And my mom's a ballet teacher, so I think that's why she had the insight into the idea. And she was like, "Oh, why don't you become a yoga teacher?" And I don't think if she hadn't had asked me the question, I don't think it would have come into my consciousness, like into my awareness, because I just didn't think that that was a real thing. And so I think that's like the most beautiful thing of my yoga journey was by just going into the idea of, maybe I can do something else and be something else. That opened all the doors for me. And it took me 2 years to commit to a teacher training course because deep inside, I just knew my whole life was going to change if I do this. And that's a really scary thought. And that's exactly what happened. I found a studio where I wanted to do my yoga teacher training. I did a part-time course, so it was over a couple of months. And within being in that course for a month, so at this point, I'm also still part-time producing, but within a month, the owners of the studio offered me the role to manage the studio, which I took. So I left my job in production, which was quite intense because I'd worked myself up quite high up. I mean, I was like at the private office. I was working on like multi-million rand projects, like da 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 da. And I was like, I'm done with that. And then my boyfriend at the time broke up with me, and I moved, and my whole life was just like thrown completely upside down. And I think that is what happens when you make these big shifts and changes. And I never looked back. I never looked back after that. So that's pretty much how I got into it. And I mean, from there on out, it's slowly but surely just been I've just integrated the practices deeper and deeper into my life.
Yeah, so you've come a long road until you're here and a very exciting journey. And you said you were diagnosed with bipolar. And how did yoga influence your own personal mental health and your personal well-being?
Sure. It's been incredible. I think what few people know about yoga is when people hear the word yoga, they think handstands and splits, and you see the girls in the bikinis on Instagram, and that's kind of the rap that yoga gets in the Western world. Whereas yoga is actually more of a full life philosophy. A full life philosophy. It's a pathway that you walk. So the philosophy of yoga is very deeply integrated into all the parts of the practice. So you've got your mindfulness practices. You've got your physical practice, which we call asana. You've then got your breathwork practices, which is called pranayama. Um, so I think it was definitely a combination of getting to know all those things. But most importantly, the practice of yoga really asks you to show up for yourself, which I think so few people do in the world. I mean, we'll drop our plans at the drop of a hat if someone else needs something. But to show up for yourself consistently is so hard. And I think that's one of the biggest gifts that yoga has given me was get on your mat every day. And it took me a very long time to get to that realization and to integrate those practices daily. I mean, now if I don't get on my mat for one day, I feel like something's wrong. And I'll never forget when I just started my yoga practice. Um, there was one day where I was just like, oh, I'm not, because I know when I'm not getting on my mat, there's something wrong. And I was like, oh, I'm not less for getting on my mat. I went to work. I especially wore jeans to the studio that day because I was like, I'm not doing a class today. And Tamsin Sheehy, who's the owner of the Shala, she's a very dear friend of mine now. She, really was my teacher. And I remember getting there and being in a very bad space and her saying to me, you're going to go into the bathroom, you're going to pick out a pair of tights from the lost and found box, and you're going to put them on, and you're going to go upstairs and you're going to get on your mat because that's what you do. Like when times are the worst, you get on your mat. When times are the best, you get on your mats. And so I think it really is that combination of showing up for yourself, um, understanding that you really are your own healer, but that really takes self mastery. So it's also very much a mental strength game, but then also embodying the practices. Because I mean, we all know that you can watch 100 TED Talks, you can read 100 self motivation books. If you're not applying any of those things in your life, it's not going to help you to shift anything because then you're just sitting with knowledge in the brain instead of wisdom in the body. And so by getting on my mat every day, I think that was one of the big things. And then also these practices, one of my other teachers, he said it so well. He says that the thing with yoga is that a lot of these practices are scientifically unproven, but they're experientially true, meaning that we have seen, and I have seen through all these years, through working with hundreds of people, that when they do these practices, it works. So knowing that it really, really works, and it's not always something that's quick. Yoga is not a quick fix, which is also something that I think Western medicine deals with a lot. It's like, let's put a literal plaster on, let's drink a pill, let's get an injection, let's go on a quick round of antibiotics. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things. That's great that we've got Western medicine for those. But ultimately, if you're looking for really, high vibration, good health, and good mental health, it takes time and it takes effort and you showing up. So that's showing up and doing these practices where you're in different shapes, where you're doing things like inverting your body, where you're doing different breathing techniques. And all of these things affect more than just our skeletal and our muscular systems in our body. So one of my philosophies with my teaching is that the way I'll teach a class, I'm looking at it from a perspective of what is this doing to our internal systems? So we are improving our digestion. We are balancing our nervous system. We are flushing our lymphatic system. We're getting our cardiovascular system switched on, our respiratory system switched on. So you are literally working to support all the internal systems in your body that are responsible for the way you feel, the way you look, the way you're able to have your quality of sleep, the way you're digesting your food, your hormonal balance, all of those things. So I think that's, something that I nerd out about these things, but how incredible that by just doing a few simple stretches, by putting your legs up in the air, by taking a few breaths, by just lying on your back for 5 minutes, you can literally affect the level of health and vitality that is going on in your physical body. And the, I always use this example. We have our physical body, we have our energetic body, we have our emotional body, we've got the mental mind, and they're all connected. And if you think of something, I love these examples. It's like when you feel sad, the body cries, you've got tears. When you see something beautiful and you get like goose flesh, when you're nervous and your stomach literally goes into a knot, that is because our emotional state and our physical state is like this. And so you can imagine that if you're looking after the health of the physical body, you're going to be looking after the health of your emotions, of your mental health, your energetic. So it really like works both ways. And so I think for me, I paired my yoga practice with psychiatric medication, which I was on for 9 years, I think. I've actually, just come off it, but in the bigger picture, it is just come off it. I've been off my medication for 6 months now, which has been
Well,
incredible because that was always my goal. But I made it my goal never to rush it, but to bring in so many other things that can support me that eventually I could come off this medication. And I'm very lucky that that has happened for me. And disclaimer, I don't say to anyone, oh, start doing yoga and you're going to come off your meds. But through the support of my yoga practice, through quite a few other practices, medicinal plants and meditation, and moving out to the platteland, moving out to the countryside, all of these things have made such a difference that I could come off them. But in those 9 years, I really needed that. And I was going to therapy alongside my yoga practice. But it really is the yoga that has like supported me and been that bridge for me to find more clarity in what is, I think, what is good for me and what is not good for me. The mindfulness aspect of yoga is so large, and when we are more mindful of ourselves and what we're doing, we can make better decisions in our lives.
and you mentioned breath work a lot. What actually is breath work? What is breath work and meditation, and what is the difference between the two, and how does it align with the yoga and also the yoga that you do?
Amazing. That's such a great question. So I think a lot of people think of meditation as, you kind of like see this picture of someone who's like sitting super tall and like their hands are in a mudra and they're sitting cross-legged and they're just quiet. And like, yes, there, there is that style of meditation, but especially when people first start meditating, most people struggle to sit still for 5 minutes. Like 5 minutes can be a push for a lot of people. Like your brain is going to be doing like backflips. It's going to be going like all over the place. So there are many different styles of meditation. So there's styles like your visualizations. So you will be guided by a voice to visualize something, and it takes you through like a journey. It goes into the subconscious mind. So it's the same with something like your yoga nidra practices, which is also a type of meditation, your full body scans, your loving kindness meditations, your vipassana meditation. You learn these techniques. So I think, that's a different thing. And another thing is that when you start meditating and things, to go and sit on your own, if you've never done this before, is probably going to frustrate you more than anything else. And you're probably going to like give up by day 3. So I always recommend like do guided meditations or go do a course where someone can like, it's a technique. You have to learn how to do these things. You have to teach the brain a different way of doing things. And it's the same with breath work. I mean, Yaku, have you given any thought to your breath today? Have you like taken like 3 deep breaths today?
No, I don't think so. Maybe a sigh. but definitely not deep breath. No. So
Yeah. So that's the average human doesn't really consider the breath, right? But if we think of how involved the breath is in our being able to be alert, connected, but also like calm and relaxed, like our nervous system. I always say, like, if you think of how many roles this airway plays. So like you say, like a sigh, how good does that feel? It instantly
okay.
makes you feel better, right? When we angry and we want to scream or cry, it's like it's out through the mouth. When the body needs to expel something out, it's a sneeze, it's a cough, it's a out. Um, it plays so many roles, and then you can combine that with things like sound. So there are a lot of breathwork practices where you also use sound. So you do a hum, like a mm, and this all has actual effects on our nervous system. So on for instance, the vagus nerve, which is kind of in the throat, it's quite close to the vocal cords. The vibration of the vocal cords affects your vagus nerve, which then tells your whole body, your whole system, you can relax. We can go into our rest and digest state. And I think that's one of the physical benefits of meditation and breath work is that it helps us to move into what we call our parasympathetic nervous system. So we've kind of got like two programs of our nervous system that works. The one is the rest and digest, parasympathetic. That's when your body is like kind of functioning how it should. Like digestion is occurring. It's able to like go around the body and look like, is there a little cell that needs to be healed? Can I go help there, help there? Whereas the other nervous system is our sympathetic, and that is our fight, flight, freeze. So most people use the example of when would that nervous system be important? That would be like years ago when there's a lion and you need to be able to like go like, am I freezing? Am I running? Am I fighting? Like we need that nervous system. But what happens these days is that nervous system gets triggered by things like I've got that email that I really, really don't want to reply to, and it's just causing me so much stress, or I'm driving in a car and I'm having to be alert all the time, or I live in the city and I just hear these noises and sirens and etc. etc. Or I'm watching the news or I'm scrolling on a social media platform, and we're constantly putting ourselves into this state of stress. And so what happens when our body's in that kind of sympathetic nervous system is it starts pulling its energy and attention away from the less crucial systems of the body. So it goes, okay, if I need to fight or flight now, that means I don't need to be digesting my food. Okay, that can wait for later. But you can imagine if you're constantly in that state, your body's not paying attention to the less important systems and organs in the body, you actually your health starts to deteriorate because it's not functioning as it should be. It's not healing. It's not processing. And so being able to bring yourself back into your rest and digest state really is one of the main benefits of these practices. I hope that
how
makes
do you,
sense. I hope I answered your
yes,
question.
yes, definitely. How do you think our current lives, it is a constant rush. You rush to this place, you rush to get to work, you rush home to get food before it's load shedding, you rush everything, and at the work it's stress, you rush to get the deadline. How do you think that is affecting our physical and as well as our mental health?
I mean, look at the state of the world, right? You can look at the statistics of how many people have cancer, how many people have heart conditions, how many people have mental health conditions. It's a pandemic out there, like everyone looked at COVID going like, oh, there's a big pandemic, and like, yes, it was. But look at statistics of people with depression and anxiety. That's a pandemic. The levels of cancer, that's a pandemic, and that's happening all around us. But there's a level of acceptance around those things that are happening because the changes that have to take place, not only within an individual, but on a societal and a systematic level, are so large that I think it almost feels helpless sometimes. And it's I see it all the time. I'm very lucky because the people I work with are people who are going, I want to change. Help me to change. I want a better life. Like, I want to have better relationships with my family and friends. I want to feel healthy. I want to be stronger. I want to, sleep better. I want to have better quality of life. There's a level of awareness, whereas I think, so many people in this world are just living like these habitual routine lives. It's like, I wake up, I drink my coffee, I get in my car, I go to work, da 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 da. I haven't thought of my breath today. Most people are struggling with their digestion on such a high level. If you're not able to digest your food properly, you're not getting the right nutrients in, but also you're not expelling the way you're supposed to, which means the colon, the gut starts to become toxic, it becomes imbalanced. That's a whole different story. But no, it's really massive, and it's a very big problem. But I always say I do love what I do, but what I do is actually really hard, because if meditating and breath work and yoga, these practices were easy, the whole world would be at peace. Like, there's a saying, who said it? I want to say the Dalai Lama, but I'm not sure. But a quote that says, if every 7-year-old child in the world right now started meditating, we would eliminate violence within one generation. And the problem is that it is the hardest thing to do. I'm running a meditation course right now. It's a 4-week course. I've got 20 women on it. And we started last week by doing 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening. And everyone flew through week one and they're like, oh, we loved it. It's so amazing. Feeling so good. Da, 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 da. This week we're going up to 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening. And people are really struggling because people don't feel like they deserve time for themselves. There's such a high level of guilt of not doing something and checking off the lists. And people also really struggle to connect to themselves and to really check in with themselves. We're not in our bodies. We're not here right now. We're living in this mental space, and we're living in the cloud, and we're living off these dopamine hits by scrolling through social media, by ticking off your to-do lists, by feeling like you've accomplished things. People have attached their self-worth to accomplishing things, where for our mental health, our physical health, our spiritual health, what we need to be doing is resting. We need to be resting, and resting isn't you can look at it from quite a privileged point of view of being I take my dogs for long walks on the beach, I can take a bubble bath, or I can book a weekend away. That's a very privileged perspective of what self-care really is. But what really is self-care, to someone who doesn't have access to those things, who doesn't have the means to go to a spa for a weekend, how are you looking after yourself on a day-to-day basis? What are your rituals? What are your self-care practices? What do your boundaries look like? What support structures are you putting in place for yourself? And that it all there's so much that you can unpack in this conversation.
Okay, and then you also mentioned the spiritual part. How does the yoga align with the spiritual part of yourself and your well-being?
Yeah, I think for me, you go through a few moments when you are on this journey, and ultimately the practice of yoga is liberation. You're looking for the liberation from pain, from the pain that is in this world, that is in our bodies, in our minds, in our hearts. And you're ultimately looking for freedom, for a feeling of peace, for finding beauty in life. And my journey has been quite interesting, because I, over time, have almost built a connection. And there are many names. You can talk about source, you can talk about God, you can, there are many names for these things, and you've got all the different religions, and that's a whole different story. But ultimately, most people have some awareness that there is a greater power, there's a greater existence from which we come, to which we will go one day. And I think often that's where it stays. It goes like, oh, it was this miracle, I was born, and then like, okay, I'm maybe gonna like worry about like where am I going when I die. And most people forget to like that, to thread it through in your life, to have that beauty of how can you make everything meaningful and purposeful in your life. Like, we are all vibration, we are all connected. I don't know if you've seen any of the documentaries of like how, for instance, like mycelium, like mushrooms, like how connected they are across the earth, like the root systems of trees. um, Everything is so connected, and we often take humans out of nature. I saw a video that a guy did the other day, and he said, like, why do people say, like, oh, I'm going out into nature? He's like, you are nature. Like, you're not going out into nature. Like, you are part of nature. Like, we've got this different consciousness and awareness, like we're at the top of the food chain in the animal kingdom, whatever, but you're still part of that. And I think for me, like, when I get on my mat and you're just moving in your body, and you can feel sensation, you can feel your vibration, and you can calm the mind enough to become still, you open a space for something else to speak. Like, you open a channel, or whatever you want to call it, like you open something else for another, maybe bigger, greater, more connected voice. I always say, like, I'm not a very religious person, but I know that a lot of my friends are quite religious. They've got such a beautiful ritual of their praying and their prayers. If you look at so many religions, and that's really their time where they go quiet and they go, I'm surrendering to something higher than myself, and I'm going to lay my troubles out, and I'm going to ask for support and ask for help. And so from like a spiritual perspective, it's almost exactly the same. Like, how do you surrender a little bit and go, okay, I'm not in control of anything, actually. All I can take responsibility for are my thoughts, my words, and my actions. And what am I aligning that with? Um, yeah.
And then you also mentioned you're scrolling through social media. How do you think social media is affecting our lives? I actually asked this question to lots of people, and I think most of them align and come on in the same line of answering the question that social media is not always good for us. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think it's a tricky balance. I think that, we all have our addictions, and a lot of our addictions are because we get that like dopamine hit. Like, you get that quick fix of being like, you eat the chocolate, you feel good. You watch an episode of a series, you can disassociate from the world and just zoom into that, and like you can feel good. For me personally, I mean, I've had a very rocky relationship with social media. Not even just that, like just like even like my phone. Like, some days I'm just like, like I don't even want a phone, like I don't want a computer, I don't want to look at a screen anymore. But it's also been really beautiful. I mean, I was unemployed in 2020, and I built my business online. That's how my business has been built, has been through screens, has been through social media. Like, most of my clients, who I communicate with, new clients, current clients, is mostly on Instagram. I also follow a lot of super inspiring accounts on Instagram. And I think it's that saying of like, too much of something is never a good thing. And looking again, stepping back to like being mindful about it. Are you just scrolling because you're bored? Are you getting stuck into content that is actually affecting you negatively? Things like, what, don't even get me started on the news, but there's so many things to think about. It's looking at, something like the level of violence that we expose ourselves to on our screens. I mean, how many movies or series are like rape and murder and war and destruction, and we actually start to numb ourselves to these things, that where the point comes to like, there's a tsunami somewhere and like only 10 people die, so everyone's like, oh, it wasn't that bad, shame, like only one person died, but like everyone else was okay. But we're so numbed because of the size and the scale of things that we expose ourselves to, and that can be on all levels. That can be all of you start to really numb yourself out. But I think one of the big negatives I feel about social media and screen time in general is that people are hooked to it at night. So it's such a cultural norm to sit in front of the TV at night, or to fall asleep in front of the TV at night, or to lie in your bed and go on your screen. And so it's almost like an indirect effect of social media, is that the blue lights of our screen are directly affecting the quality of our sleep. And that is massive, massive, massive. I always use this example and I say, in war zones, one of the most effective methods of torture is sleep deprivation, and that's a literal thing. So, like, if you aren't sleeping well, you are affecting your cognitive part of your brain. You're affecting the health systems in your body. You're affecting all of it. So, I think it's less, again, like, it's less about going like, this is a social media thing, and more going like, why am I doing this? What am I watching? When am I watching it? How is this serving me? Because it can be very positive. It can be a beautiful tool for connection. Like I said, I built my business through it. So I'm super grateful to it. But then again, I've got a client who said to me the other day, she was like, she looked at her screen time and she's spending like 4 hours a day scrolling on TikTok. And she was like, even though her content is, she like follows all these like self-help, like spiritual people and gurus and whatever, but it's just dopamine hit after dopamine. And then what happens after those 4 hours? You put down your phone and you're like, okay, wait, like, okay, let me go do something. Let me get back to my life again. So it is like, it's trauma response, it's disassociation, it's procrastination, it's an escape from people's lives. You're escaping your life and you're going in somewhere else. And so I think, that's also the question, is like, how can you maybe change your life that you don't feel that you need to escape from it on social media, like 6-7 hours a day, or however long you're spending your time on your screen?
And then you also said that spending time on your screen and that blue light and that affects your sleep. How can yoga improve the sleep?
So I say, like, no screen time for at least like 2 hours before you go to bed. Because
Do
the
you
actual what
practice it
happens
as
is
well?
I practice it. I'm not always the best at it, but I am pretty good at it. So I have a reminder on my phone that goes off about like 45 minutes before bedtime. And I try and do it a little bit longer sometimes. But like, my husband, he's like, he's not the only one I know. It's also such a man thing, I feel, to like fall asleep in front of the TV. I feel like it's from like childhood, from like being a little boy, like he did that. I think his dad used to do it. I mean, my dad still literally will watch a movie and he'll just like sit in front of the TV sleeping. Like, I feel like it's such a dad thing. Whereas like, I like, when I go into my room, my phone is face down, my alarm's already set, I've got low lighting, I'll read my book, and I like to fall asleep in silence. Whereas if he has to go lie in a room that is silent, his mind becomes sometimes so loud that he actually can't fall asleep. So the distraction of the TV is how he like crosses, I guess, over. But that noise and that input is still affecting your systems and still affecting your nervous system. So a much healthier way for your system would be, okay, cool, the sun is setting, I'm doing my last things of the day, I'm gonna like wrap up my day, I'm gonna go get on my mat and I'm just gonna like stretch out my body 10-15 minutes, maybe lie with my legs up the wall, drain the legs, help with circulation. I'm going to do a few deep breaths. This is going to calm the nervous system, and I'm going to allow myself to now go like, I've done enough for the day, now it's rest time. And so, very simple practices. There are a lot of poses specifically that help to relax the body and the nervous system. So that's like a lot of your like forward folds. So like, you can imagine, when you are waking up in the morning, one of the first things we kind of do is we like, oh, you open up your chest, you almost go into a little back bend, you like open your throat, you lift your energy. So back bends are very like expanding and lifting and opening. Whereas, when you get in bed, it's like you want to pull in, you want to round, you like relax the head down, you do a forward fold, or, knees to chest, like that fetal position, right? It's like when you lie in bed and you're on your side, like those actual shapes are nourishing to the nervous system. Like if we think of even baby in uterus, what the shape is of that child that's being like held in the uterus, like that's all muscle memory. Like we remember everything from uterus, like is still in our like programming and still in our body. So if you think of like that fetal position, like finding shapes that make you feel really relaxed, and this is going to be different for every person, but there's really a lot that you can do. And like I said again, this isn't a quick fix. It's not, and it's not a sleeping pill, right? So it's not going to necessarily the first, second, third, fourth time work in the way that a quick little pill can help you. But if you start to train your body, like my body's at the point now where I can start doing certain work and it just immediately goes into that, because it's like, that's where we're going, that's what we're doing. I know what we're doing because we've done this before.
Okay, and then you also mentioned forward and back movements, and how does that affect your posture, and how does the posture affect your overall health, and what is that alignment, and what is that connection?
Yeah, sure. I think we've seen I've seen quite a few like images and things on social media of like these projections they're making of what humans are going to look like in the next couple of years, and it's all these like hunched over backs, like curled in hands and fingers, like really like the whole body just closing, like almost like just shutting down. Because it becomes more and more painful as you go along in life, especially if you haven't like been doing anything for your posture or been supporting your body. If you're working at a desk every day from Monday to Friday, 8 hours a day, if you look at a lot of older bodies or more elderly bodies, where are two of the first places that their bodies start to cave in, right? It's hands and wrists. If you look at old people, a lot of them have like really small, little, tiny little hands. Their little feet are curled up and like super swollen. They're unable to like really move their ankles anymore. Like things like hands and feet, like no attention is given to that. A lot of people go like, oh, I've got back pain. But like, what does that mean? Like, where is your back sore? Like, what is that from? And again, I think it's this sitting in front of the computer, sitting in front of the TV, sitting in the car. Most things that we do require us almost to hunch over. It's even like, I always like to use the example, like no one chops their carrots, in like a little back bend. Like you're hunched over, you're making tea, you're carrying a toddler, you're carrying bags. It's all this like closing in of the heart space, collapsing of the lungs, making the lungs smaller, giving the lungs less space, which means you're breathing in less oxygen, which means you're taking more shallow breaths, which means you're aggravating the nervous system, which means you're now affecting your hormone secretions, which means you're now affecting your gut microbiome, etc., etc. Like everything leads on to the next. So if you, I like to say to people, if you see your body and you could have an X-ray vision of say how you're sitting right now, can you imagine like where your organs are sitting and like what is being like squashed and what is being pulled? Like you can imagine if you sit up straight, if your spine is nice and tall and aligned and you're giving everything a bit more space, your circulation is going to be better. Okay, my circulation is better, my lungs are more open, my chest is open, I'm breathing deeper, I've got more energy. I've got more energy, I'm more aware. You can think it's literally, it's all so connected. But there really are very simple things you can do, checking in with yourself once a day, taking your arms up, taking a nice big stretch, reaching the arms back, opening up the chest, doing a few little hip rolls, rolling into your joints a little bit. A practice that I always say, like doing lymphatic drainage work, which is also very simple. It can be a few simple sways side to side. One of, I spoke a bit earlier about the philosophies of my teaching, and I mentioned that one of the things I keep in mind when I teach is how is this affecting our internal systems. Another thing to keep in mind is that for spinal health, so for those who don't know, you've got your skull, and within your skull you have your brain. Then between the skull and the neck, the cervical vertebra, you have your brainstem. which then becomes the spinal cord. The spinal cord runs through all your vertebrae down your spine, and that's the highway of the nervous system. So from there, all the whole nerve system or the whole network moves out, all the way to your fingers, all the way to your toes. But ultimately, to keep the spinal column healthy, we need to be moving our spine in 6 directions every day. So it's like I just said, it's the back bend, so your extension, it's your flexion, your forward folding, then it's your rotation to the right, your rotation to the left, your side, so your lateral movement over to the right, and your lateral movement over to the left. So if you're making sure that you're moving your spine in 6 directions every day, you're taking a few deep breaths, you're flushing your lymph, that's already a very great way to start. And you can literally do 5 minutes every day and you will start to feel a difference.
Yes, okay. And then you mentioned older people and younger people, and there is like a misconception that yoga is for older people that need to stretch, and it is only. Is there any other misconceptions that you would like to clarify about yoga?
Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah, I think so. One of the big ones that I often get is people are like, oh, you must just always be so calm. Like, you just do yoga all day and teach yoga. You must always be so like calm and relaxed and like da 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 da. And again, it's like this practice isn't a magic fix to like make everything great and perfect. What it does is it supports us through life, which is very imperfect, and life, which is very hard and very challenging. And it works as a support tool, not as a like, I'm just going to like fix everything. So I'm like, no, what it doesn't make me not stress or doesn't make me feel like I'm like, I'm not living out in the mountains, like meditating 10 hours a day. If I was doing that, then yes, I would probably feel like super, super relaxed, like most of the time. But what it stops me from doing, and I think especially with my bipolar, where you can get the very high highs and the very low lows, is it almost helps to buffer that a little bit. So instead of me having like a complete breakdown or a flip out at someone, I'm able to go, I'm taking a breath, I'm back in my body, I'm back in the moment. I can now have a better reaction to the thing that's happening to me or make a better decision of something that I need to do. I think the other misconception is that you have to be flexible to do yoga or mobile to do yoga. Not at all. Yoga is a practice of healing. Yoga is for everybody. And we're all so unique. Like I always say to people, look at your fingerprints. There is no one who has fingerprints like you, which means there's no one that has the rest of your body like you. So stop looking around at what everyone else is doing and focus on what your body needs. Yoga is a practice. It's not something that we do to ourselves. It's something that you're doing for yourself. You're not doing this to your body. You're doing this for your body. And so when you start to think from that perception, it really changes the intention of why you're doing it. And yes, your flexibility will get better. Your mobility will get better. Your strength will get better. Your balance will get better. Your sleep will get better. But you do not need to enter the practice being able to do splits or a handstand or anything like that. Let me think if there's anything else. I mean, I think there's quite a lot. This practice is not from the Western world. And so a lot of the things have been changed to look and sound and be a different way. So if you are really interested in yoga, do some research on the yoga philosophy, like where it's come from, like what the teachers. There's so many amazing teachers that have brought this practice to us from like hundreds of years ago. Yeah, do a little bit of reading up on where it comes from. It's really fascinating.
And then you also said that you just started that with your breathwork program, if I'm correct. And you say the first week is only 10 minutes, 10 minutes. The next week is going to be 20 minutes, 20 minutes. And you say then people already starting to struggle. Then how do you stay consistent? How can people stay consistent in practicing not only yoga, but things in their daily lives that they need?
Mm, love this question. Love this question. So it's a meditation course that I'm doing at the moment. There is a little bit of breath work included because they kind of go together. So there's always, whenever you start a meditation, there's awareness of breath. And then from there, you kind of go into whichever technique you're practicing. But what I really teach is knowing the difference between ritual and routine. You can do the same thing every day. I mean, you get up, you eat, you brush your teeth, you get in your car, you drive to work. Most people don't even remember how they even got to work because they're doing it every single day. Like how, I mean, sure, it's happened to me. How often have you driven somewhere and you're like, oh, like, how did I get here? I don't even remember driving this road. You know, it's about being mindful, and it's about bringing ritual, almost ceremony, into the things that you do, the mundane things. How can you make your shower more mindful? How can you make brushing your teeth more mindful? Can you sit down in the morning, make breakfast, sit down without your phone, without anything, and eat your food with mindfulness, participating in the reality that you're in right now? And when you bring in new practices, it's going to be challenging because at some point you're going to reach an edge of your comfort zone and an edge of starting to change your neural pathways. So scientifically proven now, right? We can change the way that we think. We can change the patterns in the brain. So the brain goes, okay, I've been doing this way for so many years. That pathway is running so strong and so quick. But now you're wanting to change the way that you're thinking or the way that you're doing things. There is going to be resistance. And that's often when people give up, is because initially, right, we get the dopamine hits again. We go, oh, check day one, check day two, check day three, feeling so proud of myself. I think this is most things. If people go on diets or exercise programs or whatever, like you do day 1 to 5 and you're like, check, 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 like super proud of myself. And then all of a sudden the resistance starts showing up. You're like, oh, it won't really matter if I skip today, right? Or no one will know if I ate this thing and I wasn't supposed to eat this thing. Or I'll do it tomorrow morning. Like that, those resist, and you can watch those conversations that the brain has with you. All those things start to show up. But when you're practicing something like yoga and you build your ability to be more mindful and more aware, you can go, no, I hear you, little voice. I hear you trying to distract me and pull me away from this thing that I know is good for me. And I'm not going to listen to you. I'm rather going to sit down and I'm going to do this. And like I said, if meditating was easy, the whole world would be at peace. It's one of the hardest things to do because we are layered with so much complexity. There's so many people walking around with so much trauma in their bodies, trauma in their minds. There's so many people who don't have support systems, whether it's an actual therapist, whether it's just having a safe home space. I think, I speak to so many of these things of going like, oh, but wake up in the morning, get on your mat, brush your teeth. There's some people who don't have a safe space in their home that they can do that. So ultimately it's going like, as an individual, what can you do for yourself? What are the small little things? If you're someone who takes public transport, can you maybe use those 5 minutes to just do 5 minutes of breath work where you just take a moment to connect with yourself, or whatever the case might be. But I think consistency really is key in these practices. And unfortunately, consistency requires commitment, and commitment requires discipline. And I think the word discipline has such a negative connotation with it. As a child, you were disciplined or you had a disciplinary hearing, whereas the concept of discipline to self is the biggest gift you can give yourself. If you can be disciplined in the practices that you know are good for you, you're giving yourself the biggest gift ever. But that takes that mental strength, that takes that awareness, that takes that commitment. And that has to come from a place that is really genuine and that is, again, driven by my purpose and your why. Like, why am I doing this? And that's always a question you can ask yourself with anything in life. I wanted to learn how to meditate. Why? And then ask yourself that why every single day so that you remember why you started in the first place.
Okay, then you also now mentioned purpose-driven and goal-driven. Why do you think people are always like we want outcome-based? Everything is outcome-based to be successful and not necessarily the journey. How do you think yoga uh, improves that or improves that way of thinking?
I think a very simple example is you will work on a certain yoga pose for years, and eventually you get this pose. And then the next day you get on your mat and you try and do that pose and you just can't do it. Like your balance is off, or you just can't find the connection or whatever. So now you've ticked off that you can do it, but now you can't do it anymore. So what it actually does is it teaches you to not attach to outcome of things, to be able to just simply be where you are and have things be as they are. And look, we all need, we call it tapas in yoga. It's like that fire, that energy, that dedication, that push forward. Like we all need that to be able to push through our thresholds. I don't think there's anything wrong with having goals and having dreams and having things that you have to do because that's where you want to get one day. But I think what's important is to not attach to those things, because what happens when we attach so strongly onto those results is when we don't get them, we end up being devastated. It ends up knocking you down completely. So, an example is like these meditation courses and things. People are like, oh, I'm going to do this. And I'm so attached to being able to do it that on the one day that I really struggle and I missed it because my day was busy, I kind of told me I'm just going to like leave it. You know what? Like it's not working this time. So I'm actually just going to leave it completely. Instead of being able to like look at it with perspective and go, it's fine. If I missed today, tomorrow I'll get back onto this again. But we are so, it's again, it's these are like societal issues. These are structural issues. It's the way that you were raised. It's the schools you went to. You were taught that for you to have worth, for you to be a good child, for you to be the important child, you need all the little badges on your jackets. You need the A pluses on your marks if you want to get into the best university. You need this and this and this, and that will all make you good and that will make you worthy. And when you're worthy, everyone will love you and you'll be popular and you'll be happy. One of my yoga teachers question in my 300-hour training, and she said, when do you feel most at ease and happy and connected, and at peace? And obviously we were a bunch of yoga teachers in the room. So we were like, well, when I'm on my yoga mat, when I'm doing my yoga. And she said, okay, what happens if you're in a car accident and you're paralyzed and you can't get on your yoga mat anymore? Where do you then find your happiness and your peace and your connection? It all within. All these other things that we're playing a part of, this this human experience, also laid with a spiritual experience of everything. That is all temporary. Everything is temporary. How many times have people been in an amazing job and they've reached a top position and then they get fired or you resign because you're moving and you've got to let that go again. I think so. It's good to have goals. It's good to be driven, but just watch how much that is determining your self-worth, your level of self-respect, your worthiness of love, feeling truly content and peaceful. Because if that gets taken away, who are you then?
Okay. And then on that note, where can people find you on Instagram, Facebook, and all that social media handles? What are your social media handles, and how can people find you?
Awesome. So yeah, on the social media train, it's alignedliving.co.za is the Instagram account. My website is kathleenbooyseyoga.com. That is actually going to be changing, but you can still use that address because it'll just redirect, but it will be the same as my Instagram. So it'll be alignedliving.co.za in the next couple of months. Otherwise, my email is info@kathleenbooyseyoga.com. But yeah, I think Instagram is just the easiest to connect with me. So alignedliving.co.za. And then if you want to find more out about my programs and things, you can just follow the link through my Instagram account to my website.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Kathleen. And thanks a lot for your time today. And to all the listeners and viewers, go and like and subscribe and follow and do all that kind of stuff on Kathleen's websites and on her Instagram, as well as this video and on these platforms. So thanks a lot today, Kathleen, and good luck in the future.
Thank you so much, Aku. I love